In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, January is almost done. I can't tell you how quick it flies by because I tend not to look at time as something that is flying by. But January is almost done, as we say. I hope your 2022 has been going well. Today we're on chapter 15 in order of revelation, and this is Surah Kafir, which is the name of a river in paradise, but it also means the abundance. That's what it translates to. But it's named after a river in heaven, which God showed Prophet Muhammad and so forth. This is probably, if I'm not mistaken, the shortest chapter in the Quran. It is 3 verses, and they're very quick, and they have a strong rhythm and rhyme to it, and they have this story where I don't know the reference of it, but I'm sure you could find it if you just Google the name Surah Al-Kawthar and Kausar or Kawthar. If you Google that name, you'll find out that there's a great story about the disbelievers or the people who did not agree with Islam questioning the poetry of the Quran, and they would say, "Oh, Muhammad is just creating these himself. These are he's just taking poetic license and so on and so forth." So they were challenged to come up with poetry themselves, and they weren't able to. But I don't want to. I don't. And there's a lovely story of the verse that they eventually came up with meant, "Oh, this cannot be written by man." But I'm not going to use that as a reference because I don't know the exact reference. I don't know if it is anecdotal. I don't know if it's created. The problem with 1400 years of history is that something is bound to be lost in translation. And while this book may be one of the few things that is preserved over the last 14 centuries, most other stories around, you can expect them to be maybe 90% accurate, 10% fiction, and that's not something surprising. This is a very short chapter, so I'm going to read it. I'm going to read the translation with you. I'm going to read what this Quran says about it, and then I'm going to talk about certain aspects of why this chapter came at this time. As I've mentioned, this is week 15 of us meeting. If the Prophet was receiving revelations every week, then it would just be his 15th week right now. He would be in month. He would have completed just slightly over 3 months of being a prophet. But it's not a weekly thing, so we can expand that to, okay, maybe it was 6 months. If not 6 months, then okay, maybe it was a year. Not more than a year or two, right? It's still the early stages. So in that regard, Islam was still in its infancy stage. Embryonic was a few weeks ago, but now it's in the infancy stages. It needs to grow much more. And the Prophet was always worried. He was worried about whether he'd be able to accomplish the task, whether he is pleasing God, whether whether his followers and his lineage will be looked after. He would continuously worry about that. So the chapter goes like this. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, verily we have granted you Al-Kawthar, which is a river in paradise. And regarding that, Anas Radhiyallahu anhu says, when the Prophet was made to ascend to the heavens, that's a whole other beautiful story called the Miraj and Isra, but we'll talk about that later. He said after his return, I came upon a river in paradise, the banks of which were made of tents of hollow pearls. Wonderful imagery. I asked Gabriel or Jibrail, what is this? He replied, this is Kawthar. Regarding the river. And this was narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari 64964, which is the collection of the ahadith, which is, what shall I say, if there were ever a collection to go as a helper to the Quran, it would be the Bukhari, Sahih Bukhari, because while the Quran is the basic document of Islam. The Bukhari is the application of it, and the Prophet is the example. We have granted you al-Kawthar, therefore turn in prayer to your Lord and sacrifice to him only. Fair enough. We know this to be true. We know because for the last 15 weeks we've been discussing this idea again and again. For he who hates you, O Muhammad, he will be cut off from posterity and every good thing in this world and in the hereafter. Okay, fair enough. That's a clear idea, and the reference to this is also by Anas. The Prophet said, "If you will have faith till he loves me more than his father, his children, and all of mankind." This is in Sahih Bukhari 115. Now, this is also common. I have not taken such a deep dive in Christianity to know for sure whether this happens in Christianity, whether Jesus says to his followers, you will not be a truly divine follower, or you will not have complete faith until you love me more than the others. The Buddha, or the Buddh, as we say in the correct language, Gautam Buddha, I don't recall him ever saying that I am the most important, you should value me more than your family. But what I do remember Buddha saying, he had a similar stance about his teachings. So Sadhguru has a wonderful video about this, and you can Google it, Sadhguru on Buddha, and it talks about this. It talks about the Buddha saying, my teaching is superior to the other teachings. If you believe that the other teachings are superior to mine, then you follow those teachings. Buddha was like that. Call Jesus or Buddha or even Moses saying to his followers, I might be wrong. I'm ill-informed, but from my memory, I don't recall it. But it's not, if you ask any Muslim, the 2 billion Muslims in the world, I don't think any of them would have a problem with this. Now, I understand that in the 21st century of neoliberal West and of technology and smartphones and so forth, if someone comes and says to you, you will not have complete faith until you love me more than your father, your children, and all of mankind, you would say, man, you crazy. That is never going to happen. I barely know you. And fair enough. That is the view that we hold today. But if you ask a Muslim, even today, 1400 years on, they would say, yep, makes sense. My father can be a flawed person, of his flaws, but it's a flawed person. My children can be flawed. All of mankind can be flawed. But we, as Muslims, tend to believe that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is near flawless. I wouldn't say flawless because I always, being a rationalist, I always leave room for disagreement. But there are Muslims who would say that he was flawless, and I would say near flawless. And I don't know which flaw I can point out. I really don't. But I am not confident in committing 100%. Yes, he was 100% flawless. Maybe he even was. But because of scientific inclination towards my discussions, I'm not going to commit to that. He was near flawless, or shall I say, he was the most flawless person to exist. And when you say most flawless, it translates to least flawed. So I'm willing to concede that without a doubt. But a lot of Muslims would say that he was flawless, and therefore, and the love for him is not him being flawed or not. What I'm trying to point out here is that in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is held in slightly higher regard than every other thing that we believe. The only entity that is valued more than the Prophet is God himself / herself / itself. God is valued more than Prophet Muhammad. There's no doubt. But in most of Islam, even in the beginning verses that one recites to accept Islam as a religion, the name of God and Muhammad, peace be upon him, are tied together in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. This is an example. But there are many others like this. So the names are tied. Obviously, God is the center, but right after that comes Muhammad. True faith, according to this reference, comes from that. But this is a whole chapter. Verily, we've granted you a river in paradise, therefore turn in prayer to your Lord and sacrifice. For he who hates you will be cut off from posterity in every good thing in this world and in the hereafter. So it's kind of the reference that I've quoted about having faith and loving more than your father. It kind of contextualizes the verse of the Quran, because the Quran is saying, "He who hates you." Now that is one extreme, but then that extreme is almost balanced and contextualized by one of the Prophet's quotations: "You will never have." None of you will have faith until you love me more than your father, your children, and all of mankind. So it kind of contextualizes it in a larger picture. But what I wanted to do is read from the Noble Quran website, which is a website that I always refer to when I'm doing these videos. And it contextualizes this chapter very well. And I'm just going to read it out, and you can see this. Before this, in Surah Duha and Surah Alam Nashrah, which we saw, we've seen that the earliest phase, the Prophet was going through trying conditions, exactly what I just said. And the whole nation had turned hostile against him. There was resistance and opposition at every side. And it was just the Prophet and a handful of companions. If any of you have ever lived in the world, which you all have, if any of you have been to high school or university or work in an office job, there is a possibility that you have experienced being alone. There's a possibility that you have experienced being ostracized and set aside. There's a possibility that you have been lonely, uncertain of the future. Muhammad, peace be upon him, has the exact same story. For 40 years, he was a beloved member of this, beloved. And now he comes with this new idea. Let's not call it a doctrine or a religion or the truth. I'm not even going to get into that because that's unnecessary. It's a new idea that he brings to the people of Arabia, people of Mecca of the time, the Quraysh. And he says, one God, and I am the messenger, and these are the right things to do. And within a few instances, like we've discussed before, he's ostracized. He's not that beloved member of his society anymore. He's hated, and they've turned hostile against him. So we've seen examples in the last week of God sending down verses and chapters consoling the Prophet. This is why I say to you, if you don't believe in God, fair enough. Fair enough. Maybe you have a scientific bent. Maybe you don't see the utility of believing in God, or maybe you just don't want to go down the path of faith. Maybe you believe in what is real and tangible. Fair enough. And our definitions of real and tangible may be different. Fair enough. But if you do believe in God, there is no way you can believe that God is vengeful or punishes or is not filled with mercy and love. These are examples repeatedly of God sending verses to his messenger to console and encourage and remind him that times will get better. A few weeks ago, we read Surah Wad-Duha, which was high noon, and it said, and surely the later period, i.e. every later period, is better for you than the former period. And soon your Lord shall give you so much that you shall be well pleased. Remember, we discussed this a few weeks ago. This is a consolation. And in the next chapters, Alam Nashrah, and we exalted your renown for you. Though the enemies are trying to defame you throughout the country, we, on the contrary, have arranged to exalt your name and fame. Remember, we talked about it. The fact is that along every hardship, there is ease. And it repeats, because God is trying to say you should not be disheartened by the severity of conditions at this time. This too shall pass. Even before we had the saying in the English language, in the Quran, this is being discussed. The conditions were very precarious when this chapter came out. came out. With this chapter was revealed. It's not a music album that it came out. And the society of the time would say, you are cut off from the community and you're reduced to a powerless and helpless individual. I'm quoting directly from the website, by the way. According to Ikrimah, when the Prophet was appointed a prophet, he began to call the people to Islam, and the people said, Muhammad is cut off from his people as a tree is cut off from its roots, which might fall to the ground at any moment. And this is narrated in Ibn Jarir, by Ibn Jarir. And Muhammad bin Ishaq said, whenever it was mentioned before As bin Wail as-Sahmi, the chief of Mecca, he used to say, let him alone, for he is only a childless man with no male offspring. Yes, at the time, the gender disparity was insane. And I know some of you might make an argument for gender relations in Islam. We will get to it, but if I may contextualize, most, if not all, religions before Islam did not give any value to women. Yes, in Hinduism you worship female goddesses, but in terms of real life practice, it's a whole different story. So this example of the time also indicates he is a childless man because he has no male offspring. That used to be a common thought. And when he dies, nobody will remember him. Well, when you're wrong, you're wrong. Because it's been 14 centuries since he died. 14 centuries at least since he died. And we love and remember him even today. Yeah, it's just the same thing again and again. And the people turned against him. And they had used so many words like weak, helpless, childless, cut off from his people. And he had lost his son. And I'll read this. The Holy Prophet, as narrated by Ibn Sa'd and Ibn Askar, who told Abdullah bin Abbas, the eldest son of the Holy Prophet was Qasim. Next to him was Zainab. Next to her, Abdullah, and next to him, 3 daughters, Kulthum, Fatima, and Ruqayya. These are the children of the Prophet. Of them, Qasim had died, and then Abdullah. Both his sons died. So typically we associate lineage with sons, and they died. And that alone can ostracize you from society. He wasn't ostracized because of that reason. His line has come to an end, and now he is abtar, cut off from roots. This is what As bin Wail had said, and this has been narrated multiple times. No son to succeed him. When he dies, his memory will perish, and you will be rid of him. Yeah, it's the same thing again and again with people being mean, rejoicing in his bereavement. Yeah, and then his uncle, like we discussed before. Yeah, they were rejoicing. Atta says, what's the full name? We don't see it. Yeah. When the second son of the Prophet died, his own uncle, Abu Lahab, like we discussed a while ago, hastened to the pagans and gave them the good news. Muhammad has become childless this night and is cut off from the root. And Abu Lahab had 12 sons. He would say, if I'm not there, I have 12 sons, you have nothing. I have this, you have that. And we've already discussed how he would be valued, how he would meet his end. Remember, his wife will wear a necklace of thorns and he will be killed. Remember, we discussed that a few weeks ago. And the people of the time were upset with him because he was worshipping one God and he was deprived of rank, esteem, honor, and they would offer him things, which is one of my favorite quotations by the Prophet Muhammad. They said, we will give you everything. We will make you this. We will make you that. Just stop with this preaching. And he said, if you put the sun on one of my hands and the moon on the other, I will still say there is one God and only one God. And I am his messenger. Yeah. So it's the same verse. again and again. And this breather came at that time to console the prophet, but also to show what is going to happen, and also to guide him right. The river in paradise is just incredible, isn't it? I find that to be very interesting. He was not the founder of Islam, alas. I don't think I said he's the founder of Islam, Annie Bhutto. When did I say that? If I said it, well, no, I can debate with you on that point, by the way, because Islam is a religion. What you're talking about is a completely different thing. But I don't know if I said it. If I said it, maybe the better term would be the apostle of the religion. Your caption, Finding God, Muhammad. Ah, right. Okay. Yeah, we can discuss that. Sure. If it's my caption, sure. No, I disagree with you. I disagree with you. And I'm not going to dive deep into it right now because I'm just discussing the chapter. But I disagree with you because when we talk about the foundation of an idea, or idea was always endemic in the universe through God's intervention, and then somebody uncovered it, it's based on that. So when we say the founder of a country, the person didn't actually found the country. The country was always there. The geography was there. So bringing an idea to the public is the way that foundation has been referred here. So I don't agree with you, but I see your point. I think the point that you're trying to make is that he didn't create Islam. Islam was always there, and fair enough. That's something that we don't disagree on. But founder is a debatable term. So no, I don't agree with you. But what I was going to say here is that this chapter is essentially very important when we talk about loneliness. Naming a river after the prophet, and then telling the prophet to pray and sacrifice, and whoever hates you will suffer. When it comes to loneliness, look around you. Look around you for the pandemic, and the pandemic is enough to put us all in our shells. And even now, with the vaccine being over a year old, new variants coming, you may have noticed, I certainly have noticed, that my behavior has changed. I'm not as inclined to go out as I used to. And in 2 years that has happened. And what has done is that has either made people realize that they're alone, or they've brought people closer to their families. And loneliness, when you're trying to establish connection with an unseen entity, with an unknown entity, with a non-tangible, non-local entity, which is God, and when you don't hear back, and then on top of that, you live in a society where you've been loved and respected for 40 years, and all of a sudden, they don't love and respect you anymore. Instead, they're hostile towards you, they're angry towards you, they hate you. What do you do? So this is God consoling Muhammad, and again. God is consoling Muhammad. God is encouraging Muhammad. If you don't believe in God, I would urge you to believe in something. Let's start there. If you don't believe in God, fair enough. I respect your disagreement with me. Believe in something, because I am an incredibly rational person. Ask anyone who knows me. But when matters like heartbreak, loneliness, depression, anxiety, stress, so many things, when they strike you, you have to constantly battle against them. And one of the strongest weapons in battling against them throughout human history has been a belief in something, whether it's fire, or the sun, or a pantheon, or an animal, or a divinity that you don't see. So I would argue that try to believe in something if you believe in nothing. Try to give yourself that freedom to take a leap of faith without knowing all the facts. Because this is an example of a man who was incredibly lonely, who's incredibly ostracized. And it's not like God imbued him with all the confidence in the world. Like, this is the truth, go spread it, you'll be fine. No, he was constantly questioning. Have you ever questioned anything that you've done? I certainly have. This morning, I was discussing with my brother about the name of my business. Is this the best name? I'm questioning. The company is over a year old. I'm still questioning the name of the company. It's doing fine. People write to me about it, but I still question the name of the company. And here you're in contact with some entity that you've never seen, and now everyone is turning against you, barring your wife, your daughters, and a few friends and relatives who say, okay, you're on the right path. Isn't that incredible? So if you could read into this chapter, please do, because I don't see the Quran only as a collection of revelations by a divine entity who we love, respect, and cherish and follow, and embodied by a human being who lived 1400 years ago. I try to see how much of it is applicable here today. So the messages of mercy and love and compassion, I still believe they're applicable. Later, when we discuss strategy or law or war, we'll discuss whether it is applicable or not. But this thing, when it talks about someone who's alone, someone who is dealing in scarcity as opposed to abundance, I find it to be incredibly apt. Therefore, it's been 26 minutes, and I'm just going to stop now. But therefore, even though it was the smallest chapter in the Quran, I've ended up talking about it for the longest time because it's an important chapter. And I know we did this, oh yeah, great, fine, fair enough. But this time of his life is when he was incredibly alone. Later he has different tasks and he has more followers and he starts delegating. But this time is something that I can definitely relate to, because there have been times in my life where I put forward an idea and the people around me in my cohorts or in my work would always say, no, you're not on the right path. We know what's right. You're not on the right path. And I'm so glad that I ended up following through with what I believe to be true. So I urge you to do the same, and this is what the book is urging as well. If you believe that you're on the right path, stick to it, whatever that path is. And now I know some wonderful polemicists will say, oh, what if I'm on the path of proving that there's no God? Fair enough. Go to it. Fair enough. I don't disrespect you. I don't disagree with you. Go right ahead. But this is an example of loneliness. The path to greatness is normally a lonely path. And if God is encouraging you, that's just beautiful. So if you're living through this year or the last 3 years being lonely and you have no one to turn to, I would urge you, try believing in God for one day. Just try for one day. If you don't like it, get rid of it. Just like we try intermittent fasting for a day, or try being a vegan for one day. Try believing in God for one day. Just say, okay, this one day, this Saturday, I'm going to believe in God. I'm going to read about him. I'm going to try to connect with him through whatever means I find necessary. If you don't like it, leave it. But I tell you, I have a strong feeling that if you do that, you might end up finding more comfort in it. And we can argue whether that's right or wrong. But I'm going to stop here. Have a wonderful Friday. Have a wonderful weekend.